Hi, my name is Brad Wise, and I'm the Chief Creative Officer here at Rebel Pilgrim, a creative agency in Cincinnati. And I'm going to share with you the 5 foundations of great storytelling that we use in almost everything we do. And that's been 7 feature films in 8 years, and most recently, a Super Bowl commercial for Cincinnati Bell. So let's jump right straight into it. The 5 foundations are: you have to find the hook, then you got to share the heart, then you got to cut the fat, then you have to weave the thread and land the plane. It all sounds very Mr. Miyagi Karate Kid-esque. So let's just get going. Find the hook. We live in a very noisy, busy world where every day we are just bombarded by brands trying to capture our attention. Think of your news feeds, and as you're driving into the radio, stories and media is everywhere. And whether we realize it or not, we're running everything that we see and hear through a simple 3-word filter: do I care? And if we don't, we keep scrolling or we change the channel. And the reality is your customers and the people that you're trying to sell or pitch whatever that you're working on and so passionate about, they're running everything through that same filter as well. Even though sometimes we think when we have our pet project and our pet product that everyone's as passionate as we are, the reality is they're not. They're just like us. They're looking for things that they care about. So a hook has to grab someone's attention. And in order to care, in order for someone to stop what they're doing and click a link or pay attention a little bit more, we have to know what's at stake. We can't care unless we know that something is at stake. And you think about commercials that you've seen, like the Betty White Snickers commercial. We care instantly when we see an old lady out on a tackle football field, and we know what's at stake. Broken hips may happen in this situation. So we care, we're in, we're hooked to this situation. A good hook doesn't just make us want to know what's going to happen. A good hook makes us need to know. So that's the first thing you have to do with your presentation. You have to find that thing that grabs someone's attention. Maybe for you that's a shocking statistic that elicits some sort of emotional response, or you're casting a vision of this new world that might become because of your product or your initiative, and then that has to have some sort of emotional response. But no matter what, hook them in, grab them by their emotions, and make them care. So then the next foundation: share the heart. Oftentimes we think when we're trying to sell a product or an initiative, we think what we have to do is tell them all the features and benefits of that product and say it does this well, it cuts this thing, it costs this much. And all of those things are great, but really only if you wrap them in a story, and only if you can wrap them in some sort of emotional package. Otherwise, it's just a list of things that we tune out. We hear those all the time. So when you share the heart, what you're doing is you're sharing the emotional things that we all resonate with, right? And to do that, what you need to start doing is thinking about your presentation or your video or whatever you're creating. Think about those things in vignettes, not just statements. Statements, they go in one ear and out the other because they're only engaging our minds. And our minds are just asking, is this true or false? When we talk about vignettes, those have beginning, middle, and ends. They're mini stories within a larger story. And when we're listening to a story, we're not asking ourselves, is this true or false? All we're doing is asking, what happens next? And when people are asking what happens next in your presentation, their emotions are engaged, you're connecting with their heart, and they're going to keep going with you. Another key factor during this section of sharing the heart is you want to make sure that your presentation has a diverse mix of tones and textures. When possible, you want to make people laugh. You want to grip them with something dramatic. You want it to be like that classic Thanksgiving dinner where you have all the different tones and textures of that, like the soft mashed potatoes and the crunchy things on the green beans, like all of that work together to make a great meal. The same thing is true when you're telling a story. You want to laugh, hope, cry, dream, all of those things in a presentation. You don't just want it to be a monotone, super serious or super silly presentation. You want that mix, because that mix then connects with all of us. That's how we experience the world, is through that breadth of emotion. So the next foundation is cut the fat. And this is the hardest one to do. When we think of our own stories, we think everything's important. We think that all the different things that led up to making this product and all the features, that they all matter. And the reality is that they just don't. And part of this, I think, comes from when we were in grade school. I think our teachers started to tell us the way you tell stories is you give them the who, the what, the where, the how, but we neglect the why. And the why is the reason that people are listening to your story. It's why they're going to connect with what you're doing. I'm thinking about my 5-year-old son, Henry, right now, who when I ask him to do anything, 99.9% of the time, what he says is, why? In order to get him to do something, he has to know why I want him to do it. It's maddening. But the reality is, we grow up and that never changes. In order for us to do anything, buy anything, go anywhere, listen to anyone, we have to know why they're asking us. And so as you're crafting this presentation or this email campaign, you need to write a 1-sentence statement that summarizes why this is important to you. Why are you doing this presentation? Why are you selling this product? Why is it so compelling that if you don't do it, the world's going to blow up? That's your due north, your why. The fourth foundation is weaving the thread. So your story, your presentation, there should be a running theme throughout the whole thing that connects it all. In every vignette that you're going to pick that serves your why, you want to make sure that this theme it's there. For Rebel Pilgrim, when we do our capabilities pitch, there's this running thread through the whole thing that we take an alternate path. So every vignette that I choose to tell in this story, there's going to be an element of that alternate path every single time. And when I think about movies, the movie that comes to mind that does a perfect job of weaving the thread is Forrest Gump. If you remember at the beginning, there's the feather that floats down and he puts it in a book. And then we flash all the way through his story, and what we see is his life takes on this theme of this feather drifting through life and everything kind of working out in a weird way to the very end of the movie. If you remember, he's at the bus stop with his kid, opens up the book from the beginning where the threads or the feathers in, and then the feather just floats away. That threads through the whole thing. And when that happens, as the audience, it just feels connected, and it feels good, and it feels like the people thought that through. Which leads us perfectly to the fifth and final foundation, which is land the plane. So I'm a part of a storytelling nonprofit here in town called Bespoken Live, and the number one mistake that I see even the best storytellers make is that they don't land the plane. They don't go into their story knowing exactly their closing sentence. They think they got it, they know what they want to do. And what happens is they end up kind of repeating themselves, circling that runway until they and the audience just sort of runs out of gas. So as you're building your story, one of the most important things you can do is write down the exact way that you're going to land the plane and close your story. And what this needs to do usually is it needs to be a grounding callback. It needs to be an answer to the problem that you started at the very beginning. It has to be that thing that when it happens, it just feels like, oh, this is where we are going the entire time. And it just feels like a solid, good ending. You've been there, right? You've been in that meeting where someone just sticks it. And we've also probably been there when someone doesn't, when they keep just repeating themselves and they just kind of fumble about. It needs to be that logical and emotional conclusion to your story. And what happens just for you personally when you know exactly what your ending line is before you go into your presentation or your story is that it relieves your anxiety. You know where you're going. You know how you're finishing. And the audience can feel that. When you don't have a sense of anxiety and you have a sense of confidence, your audience does as well. When you don't, you can feel that. Have you been there where you feel like, uh-oh, this guy doesn't know how he's going to finish this thing. And it just unnerves you, and then you can't really connect and listen. So, land the plane. These are the 5 foundations that when you look, Hollywood and Madison Avenue, they use these foundations because they are the foundations to storytelling that is written in our genes. This is how we tell stories. I'm not telling you anything new. I'm just putting somewhat clever names to it. So, you got to find the hook. You got to share the heart, you got to cut the fat, weave the thread, and land the plane. Then you drop the mic and walk off stage. Good luck.